Afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon, spending your lunchtime with us for a little bit to talk about writing in general and historical fiction kind of in the specific. My name is Teague von Bohlen. I'm a professor of creative writing at the University of Colorado, Denver, where, among other things, I help to run the fiction side of the international literary journal, Copper Nickel. Another one of my jobs is that I'm the lit sort of liaison for Westward, the alt weekly down in Denver. And among the various duties that I do with that is that I get to talk with authors who are local and who are awesome. And so in that regard, I got to meet John just a little bit ago. We ran an interview with him on Westward Online last week, I think. And that was sort of a preview for what we're going to talk about today. And I'll save those questions for a little bit because we don't have a whole lot of time here today. But quickly, I want to just turn the mic over to John, who will be reading from Beneath the Marble Sky. And then we'll kind of talk about how that came to be and the writing process and all good things. All right.
Thanks, Tage, and thanks to all of you for coming out today. It's really, I feel like Boulder, we're quite lucky for many reasons, but one of which is that we have this wonderful literary festival. And to everyone who helps volunteer, I think I even saw like an 8-year-old boy running around with a volunteer shirt on. I mean, it's awesome. So good work to everybody who puts this on. It's certainly an honor to be here, an honor to speak. Obviously, as Tej just mentioned, I'm going to be reading briefly from my novel, Beneath the Marble Sky. How many of you have read Beneath the Marble Sky? Oh, wow, maybe almost 50%. Well, thanks to all of you. I appreciate it. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Beneath the Marble Sky is my first novel. It's based on the love story behind the creation of the Taj Mahal. And the way it came to be was kind of interesting. I was teaching English in Japan straight out of college, and I knew I wanted to be a novelist. But I knew that for my first book to be successful, I had to find a really special story. And after my best friend and I spent about 1.5 years in Japan teaching English, we saved up quite a bit of money and backpacked around Asia for 6 months, and I was looking for that story, looking for that tale, and came upon the Taj Mahal. And I was just so blown away by the magic and the majesty of the Taj Mahal that I started to research it a little bit and was quite surprised to see that no one in the West had ever written a novel about it before. I mean, it's arguably the most famous love story in the world, arguably the most famous building in the world, and no one had ever written a book about it, fiction. And so I felt like there was really an opportunity to do something. And met my future wife. We moved out to Colorado. This was in 1999. I started working in Denver at a public relations agency. We were launching the agency. It was a lot of work. It was very busy. But I had this dream of being a novelist. And so I would come home every night and write after work. After doing press releases all day, I'd switch gears and start writing fiction. Try to get inside the brain of my narrator, who was a 17th century Indian princess, the daughter of the emperor who built the Taj Mahal in memory of his beloved wife. So under those sort of confines, I spent 5 years working on Beneath the Marble Sky. And it came out in 2004. I was lucky it got great reviews, and we sold the movie rights, and it became an international bestseller. Now it's actually in 24 different languages, and allowed me to quit my day job. And I've got 7 novels out now, and it's fun. All my books are set in Asia, so I get to go back there a couple times a year. And I'm now actually leading literary tours to the settings of my novels, so I'll take a group to India or to China or to Japan or whatever. So I'm having a lot of wonderful adventures, and I'm grateful for readers like you because you make it possible. And I'm just going to do a brief reading. Readings aren't, I've only really done one reading. If we had more time, there's a funny story behind my first reading. I was in front of a huge crowd, and I actually got the giggles. And couldn't really get through it very well. But ended up selling a lot of books because I think people thought I was such a lunatic. They wondered, who is this guy and what's he written about? So I'm actually going to just read from the very last scene of the book. And normally one would not do that because, of course, one would not want to do any spoilers. But Again, my book is narrated by the daughter of the man who built the Taj Mahal for his wife. And at the very outset of my story, she's telling her story to her granddaughters. And she's an older woman. And the book starts out, the next scene, she's a young girl. But the very last few pages of the book, she's again an older woman, and she's sort of sitting here looking at the Taj Mahal, musing over her life, her history, her emotions, and all that. So I'm just going to read for just about a page and a half. And I've never had to do this before, but I'm going to take off my glasses. So I guess I'm getting older. All right. Perhaps the Hindus are partially right, for I do think we lead many lives. Yet these lives aren't separate, as they believe, but one. My lives were simple. I learned as a child, I explored as a girl, and I bled and loved as a woman. Now that I'm old, I see so many lives in my life. They're as different as stones, and yet they're connected. When I look back at them, I wonder sometimes if they were but dreams. I kiss my granddaughters goodnight as Nizam rows us to shore, where their father awaits. I then bid my friend farewell, though he follows me as I shuffle toward the Taj Mahal. It is as I remember. I see Mother's grace in its arches and Isa's brilliance everywhere. As a child, I was taught that Muslims don't believe that the soul remains upon the land, but that after death we're carried to paradise, where we walk among friends and feast upon our favorite foods, and where our happiness blooms eternally. But now, as I sit with my hands against the marble that Isa once held, I'm struck profoundly by the sense that part of him still lingers here. It's almost as if I can feel him. Is it love I feel, or a oneness surpassing even love? For love is a human emotion, and what I sense now is beyond anything of this earth. It's too perfect to have been conjured by mortals, for Isa is with me, and as my face tightens and tears come forth, I see only him. He laughs, he cries, he holds me, and we whisper as candles burn low. How I miss you, I say to the rock. Will you come to me in my dreams? Even if no answer is offered, I know he shall. Allah might have taken Isa's body, but he isn't truly gone. We speak sometimes in the night, talk of our Taj Mahal or our child. He still calls me Swallow. My hands touch the marble, and again I feel Isa. He is here. Mother sits with them, as do Dara and father. I feel Ladli as well. Their mood is gay, and they're as young as the seasons. Soon I will join them. Many fear death, but I do not, for I have tasted this oneness we call love. Death cannot steal it, nor temper it. No, I'll take my love with me wherever I travel, and it shall endure. So that's just kind of her wrapping up. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I got through without laughing at myself, so I guess I'm making progress in life. So anyway, I think Tej now has some questions for me, and we'll talk through some things.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that reading. It's always great to hear an author reading their words. It shows sort of an insight into how they're thinking of the words coming across. I wanted to start off just today by asking a little bit about what it's like to write about a culture that is not your home culture, right? I'm largely a regionalist with my own work. I write largely about the Midwest where I grew up, and so this is sort of the opposite of that in a big way. So what is that experience like? What are the challenges of it, and what kind of factors play into the creative process?
Well, that's a great question, and it's an issue that I've sort of wrestled with for about 12 years now. My latest novel actually is titled Unbound, and it's set on the Great Wall of China, set in the 17th century, the Ming Dynasty. So this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, and once I've sort of identified a story I want to bring back to life, what I typically do will spend a lot of time in the country that I'm writing about. So before I even wrote a single word, for instance, in Beneath the Marble Sky, I spent about a month in India and really kind of seeing it from top to bottom. And that gave me a bit of a comfort level. But then, of course, I do as much research as possible. I read everything that's been written about it, from memoirs and as many firsthand accounts as possible. I look at hundreds and hundreds of works of art. I find art to be quite helpful in terms of looking at paintings from the period, because they show me what people were wearing, what they were eating, the environments in which they lived, and all of that. So I spend a great deal of time. And then the other thing I do is I take hundreds of photos of the place that I'm writing about, whether it was the Taj Mahal, the Great Wall of China, and the environment around those places. And then I'll tape those photos to the walls of my office. So I'm always sort of, looking at those for inspiration. So obviously I'm not a native in these places that I'm writing about, so it's probably never going to be perfect. But I think for Beneath the Marble Sky and for my latest novel, Unbound, I probably spent 6 months researching each story full time. So that's about as good a job as I can do. And I'm quite pleased. And in fact, for Beneath the Marble Sky, when it first came out, I was quite nervous about that exact issue. But I had, I think, 6 different Indian newspapers review the book in India, and they all gave it good reviews. So I felt like, well, I must have done something right.
Yeah, that's really interesting. The getting that sort of validation from the papers in India itself must have been pretty gratifying. So when you go there, because you still go back to these places, you mentioned that you take these trips, and these are sort of how would you describe these trips that you take now with with fans and also with your own family? What's it like to visit these places again once you've written about them and sort of you've given the literary world like your take on this period and this place? What's it like to go back there, and what's that experience like for you?
It's great to go back, and that's one of the reasons that I created this little side business where I do these literary tours and I take readers to the settings of my books. I love, because I'm very passionate about Asia, about that part of the world and my stories, and it's fun to follow in the footsteps of my characters and go to some obscure little place that no other tourist knows about, because I've done so much research. My 6th book is set at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and there's this really special tiny little room in Angkor Wat that not even the local guides know about. And it's fun to take people into that and to experience a moment that my characters had in that room together. And so I love going back to these places. I always learn new things. And occasionally I'll see, I wish I'd seen this 3 years ago. I would have incorporated that into the book. So I'm always kind of learning new things, and it's always a new adventure. Yeah.
How often do you take those trips with your fans?
3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah. That's an amazing, it's an amazing experience. It must be an amazing experience to be able to go and sort of explain not only the place, but also the inspiration behind. I mean, do you talk to the fans that go with you that about like how this part of the book began, what inspired you there, those details like that?
Absolutely. We have those conversations, and people are quite interested, and it's just, again, it's a part of the world that I find fascinating, and for me, it's so dynamic, and it's one of the reasons I settled on Asia as a writer was because when I grew up in high school, I was reading a lot of historical fiction, but as far as I could tell, most of it was predominantly set in Europe. A lot of great books, a lot of great stories, but I felt like, wow, there's this whole other really dynamic part of the world that's sort of underrepresented in my mind in terms of the historical fictions out there in Western markets. So I kind of saw an opportunity, and that's one reason I dove right into it.
Yeah, and that reminds me of you mentioned in the book that you do a lot of book club kind of things via Skype or phone, or so maybe talk a little bit about the community that how important community is to writing, especially today. I mean, the community that of your readership and how you interact with them. How important is that to you as a writer, and what kind of effect does that have on your work?
It's profoundly important. And again, when I was in high school reading a lot, I always had a desire to connect with the authors I was reading. And I sent off a few letters, and they were never returned. And I just said to myself, if I ever get a novel published, I want to make myself available to readers. So when Beneath the Marble Sky came out in paperback, I put a letter in the back of it inviting book clubs to invite me to their experiences, and I could have a chat with them through speakerphone. And I put my email address in the back of the book. And when I told the people at Penguin that I want to do this, they kind of laughed at me. Thought, oh, here's this little guy from Iowa. He's got this cute little idea. It had never really been done before. And the national media got wind of it. And one night I was on the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric, and I opened my email inbox the next day, and I had emails from 800 different book clubs. And so right now I've spoken with probably 3,000 book clubs around the world, which is probably a record in the publishing industry. So, oh, thanks. So it's, thank you. And probably a few people out here have been on the other end of those calls. And I've learned a lot from it, and I guess to get back to your original question, community. I mean, it's really important, I think, for writers and readers to connect. And my point of view has always been, if people are going to go out and buy my books and support me, then I want to be supportive in return.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. I mean, and I can totally understand a publisher being a little skittish about the idea at first, for sure. But I do, yeah, I agree that I think that building that community must be a part of that sort of accessible nature of the writing itself, right? You're trying to communicate with people through the words themselves, through the book itself, and then there's sort of an extension of that can come through in that process. Do you think about that when you're writing the books now that you have that in place, that are book club questions occurring to you as you're writing?
Well, book clubs are interesting. You know, some have been drinking margaritas for hours, and some have been Googling for hours. So they're all different. But I don't really think about that when I'm writing. But what I do every day is I'll write in the morning while my brain's fresh and is functioning as best as it can. And then in the afternoon, I'll switch over to interacting with readers, because today with Instagram and Facebook and all these different mediums, that you're constantly getting inundated with emails from people. Oh, I love this about your book. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? And I answer every single email. I probably get at least 100 a day, because it's just, again, it's important for me to make myself available and to communicate and to give back. And I do learn things from readers, and I've heard some beautiful stories from readers. Actually, about a year ago, I got an email from a woman who, after reading Beneath the Marble Sky, her parents had gone to India when she and her sisters were in their teens. They'd gone to see the Taj Mahal. And when her mom and dad were over there, unfortunately, they were in a plane crash and they both died. And this woman, who I think was in her 40s when she emailed me, said, my sisters and I had never wanted to go back to or go to India, but after reading your book, we're all planning a trip there together to celebrate our parents' lives. And I thought, wow, I mean, that was really touching. So you do have those kind of amazing interactions with readers, and I'm grateful for all of them.
Yeah, great. I have 1,000 more questions, but and I'm sure you all do too. I'm getting the signal that we have to wrap this up. This has been very quick. I know John's going to be signing books later on. I just want to throw a pitch in for his latest book, Unbound, which is fantastic. So if you have a chance, snag a copy of that, get it signed. Please, everybody, help us thank John Shores.
Well, he was much more aware of things than me, because I could have chatted forever, but I didn't even notice the sign, so thanks for noticing that. And thanks to all of you for coming out today, and have a wonderful weekend. Take care. Oh, 3 minutes for questions. Right. Anyone got a question back there?
Okay, awesome.
Okay. Oh, yes.
I was curious, since you came from a public relations background, did you have creative writing experience from school? How was the transition to fiction for you?
I was really blessed. My first job after coming back from Japan, actually right before public relations, I was a newspaper reporter, and I had a great editor. And it wasn't fiction, but I did learn quite a bit from him, almost using words as money and not spending them unnecessarily. And so I think that sort of seeped into my fiction writing. But I think the most important thing for me was just reading. When I was probably 13, I've got 3 younger brothers. My dad literally threw away our television. So we just all grew up reading. I can't do that with our kids. They'd kill me. But it was greatly advantageous to me. Good question. Probably 2 more questions we have time for. Yes?
What advice do you have for a creative nonfiction writer who is working on a work of fiction?
So what advice do I have for a nonfiction writer? I would say any writer. I mean, the advice I would have is edit. I actually edited this book, reread it 56 times. And, I was writing as a young guy from Iowa trying to get into the head of a 17th century Indian princess. So getting her voice, I needed to spend as much time with her as possible, so it was edit. I see so many young writers, And they'll say, oh, I just finished this book. I'm going to go try to get an agent. And I'll say, well, how much time have you spent editing it? Oh, I edited it once or twice. I had my friend read it. I'm good to go. I think to myself, you have no chance. You know, you have to spend the time to make it shine. One more question? Yes?
If you don't mind.
Sure.
The research piece, because this is historical fiction, how do you avoid getting bogged down in all the details and just everything that's in that? Like, every time I've gone down that rabbit hole, it really feels like a rabbit hole. So at what point do you say, you know what, I'm good, I'm going to start writing?
Yeah, that's a fine line. You're right, it can get bogged down. There's actually a scene in here I really liked that my editor pressured me into cutting that I still wish was in there. There was a scene where they were playing chess with people dressed up, and I thought it was kind of cool, and it was a paragraph or two. But anyway, I don't know. I think you just have to go with your instinct, and if it seems like the pace is getting too slow, too tedious, then there are probably too many details in there. But I think you can populate a story with some details and kind of quick little snippets that don't slow down the pace. Good question. All right, well, thanks again, everybody. Happy Sunday. Take care.